I'm joined now by New England Patriots beat reporter who has worked at ESPN since 2009. On behalf of myself and Brandeis University, Mike Reiss, thank you for joining the program today.
William, thanks for having me. I think Brandeis is a great university, and it's great to be with you. So thanks for having me.
On Tuesday, an ESPN press release announced that for the ninth season, the network will have 32 NFL reporters stationed around the country, one for every team. What are your thoughts on this news and how it helps the sports journalism industry?
It fires me up, William, the news. I think to me at ESPN, we have the NFL covered, that we have boots on the ground at all 32 teams, so that if you're a consumer that's thirsty for all things NFL, anything going on with any team, you know that we're there. We're there every day for the news conferences with the head coaches, interviews with the players. In a normal year would be in the locker room. But in a COVID year, we can't necessarily be in the locker room. So we make the best of it. We're at practice. So that's what we try to do. We try to be that connection between the consumer who's looking for information on these teams and the teams themselves.
Do you think that it's more of an addition and it just expedites it that much more that ESPN now has it covered across the country and there is one reporter in every single city?
Well, the thing I love about it is that if something happens, like we're talking right now, and let's say 2 minutes from now, Mac Jones, let's think positively. Let's say something positive happens to him. I don't know what it would be, right, William? But let's say it happens and they say, we got NFL Live coming up at 4:00. Like, let's call up our Patriots reporter, have him turn on his camera, and we can get him on TV, whether it be from the stadium or from the home office. And I think just to be in those markets around those teams, I think it makes us nimble, so we can react quickly in an ever-evolving business, right? Like, we don't know when news is going to happen. Like, I'll give you another example, William. I was walking my son to school on Friday morning, the day we're talking here, and all of a sudden Cam Newton hits play on his YouTube Live, talking in detail about his release from the Patriots for the first time. And it's like, all right, let me get my son to school. I got to go. I got to get this story to ESPN. And if you look, on this Friday, the story is on the ticker, it's being talked about. And so you never know when the news is going to hit. So just being in that market and sort of feeling that, I feel like can be a really positive thing.
A Massachusetts native and one to make frequent daily appearances on various ESPN shows, I believe most of our listeners are unfamiliar with your journalism path. Could you explain your journey to becoming a reporter for the Patriots?
Absolutely. I'm happy to. So my dad, William, was a sportscaster when I was growing up. And I think like a lot of kids, you look at your parents and see what they do. And sometimes you might go in the same direction. Other times you might go in a different direction. I just remember loving sports from as young as I can remember. And I always wanted to play sports. But for those who have ever seen me, you might realize it's a smaller physical package there.
I remember the photo with you and Trent Brown.
Yeah. So like, let's call it more in the Julian Edelman, Wes Welker, Danny Woodhead, J.J. Taylor category than the Trent Brown, Nate Solder, Lawrence Guy, any other big player that you want to. So, my dad had said to me when he said, look, you might not play sports, but a way to be around them is to be a reporter. And he drove me down to the local newspaper in my hometown of Framingham, Mass, not far from where Brandeis is. And he said, try to get involved. And I worked at the sports department at the local paper. And I just fell in love with it. And that became my team. And then I continued writing in college at UMass Amherst in the mid 1990s. They had great sports out there at the time. The men's basketball team was #1 in the country. John Calipari was the head coach. Marcus Camby was the star player. And then I sent out hundreds of resumes to newspapers around the country, hoping to get a job with all this experience I had already accrued. And every letter I sent out came back with a rejection. No job offers. And the one job offer I got was from the Patriots team newspaper. And the only reason it came to me was that my brother had a friend who knew the editor who was having trouble filling the position and had asked if this friend had known anyone, and it got my foot in the door. And so it's a reminder to me, as someone in similar, in your position, Brandeis, that might be listening to this, like, our resumes are important. The experience we try to accrue is important. The networking part of it is also critical. And that would probably be the point I would highlight from my own journey to just get my foot in the door.
Do you find that today that if one pursues a master's, let's say at Northwestern, or if one goes a different route and decides to go to Dubuque, Iowa and become a sports reporter there, that experience does supplement education, meaning higher education? Do you find that?
I've always believed that. And I have a little story to tell you that has stayed with me through the years on that. And it was actually from my first year working for the Patriots in 1997. And I just had, there was like almost like a father figure with the team. His name was Ron O'Neill. He was the team's athletic trainer. And we would sit together on bus rides to road games, when we would ride to the airport before getting on the team charter. And he told me, he said, look, you've gone to UMass Amherst and got your bachelor's degree, your BS in sport management. That's what I studied. He said, but what you really need to go get is your BT degree. And I said to him, Ron, what are you talking about? A BT degree? And he said, BT, your been there degree. You need to be there and experience what you're studying to supplement what you learned in the classroom. And he used an example of his own career as an athletic trainer. And he said, as I remember it, like, I can study what to do when I'm running out on the field and a player isn't moving his legs. But until I'm in the moment and react to what all the emotions are in that moment and how I need to stay calm and I need to react, there's no substitute for actually doing it. You can study it, but try to also put yourself in a position to do it. And that's how we all grow.
You teamed up with former Patriots wide receiver, now Patriots coach Troy Brown to write Patriot Pride, My Life in the New England Dynasty. What was that experience like, and how does that form of writing differ from traditional sports journalism?
Well, that experience was hard. Writing a book is hard. And the way that came to me, William, was it wasn't my original project. Troy was actually working with someone else, and the project was going forward. And I think it didn't necessarily unfold the way that it was originally drawn up to happen. And so Troy had actually reached out to me from our experience covering each other, or me covering him, I should say, and said, would you consider taking this project over for me? And I said, with some of the work already done, I think a daunting project might make it more manageable for me, because I had some anxiety in even attempting to try a book. So that was the first part of it. The second part of it was, anytime you're going to do something like that, you always want to do it with someone you believe in, that you sort of would stand for, and Troy is a type of guy to me, like, he's my type of person. He's very humble. I love his story. I love and I love what he stands for. And so those were sort of the main things that went along. And I'll tell you, writing at 3, 4 in the morning, just trying to find that time of day where I could have some clarity of thought, that was the most challenging part to me.
Last season, league protocols, and I guess also this season, limit journalists' abilities to report and interact with team personnel. What adjustments did you find you had to make to continue working efficiently?
Well, there's a lot of adjustments. I think in the big picture, I would say, there's no substitute for being in the locker room. And it ties to the story that I talked about with Ron O'Neill, the Patriots athletic trainer, that BT degree. You need to be there. You want to feel the personality. And one of my favorite stories in that regard goes back to the year 2014. Like, I love to tell the Malcolm Butler story of how he was the hero of the Super Bowl that year. But I could tell you there was a week 11 game, I think it was, where they were preparing to play the Packers. And I walked up to Malcolm in the locker room. He was at his locker, and he was just hanging his head. His head was down. And I walked up to him. I said, Malcolm, what's going on? He goes, I'm not in the plan this week, not in the game plan. I'm going to be inactive, really down.
Mhm.
And I'll never forget it. And I told him, I said, and you know, as a reporter and with the players, like there's a personal connection that you can develop just due to
Yeah.
daily conversation.
You see him
And I
every
said
day
to him,
for a period of months.
that's right. Said to him, Malcolm, look how far you've already come. Undrafted free agent, West Alabama. You're on the team. You're coming. Your time is gonna come. You just got to keep your head up. And I love to tell that story because he ended up being the star. He saved the Super Bowl for the Patriots. So when we talk about adjustments that we have to make in a COVID world, like there's no adjustment to have that type of experience. You can't do it. We can't get close to the players for their safety, for our safety. So it's more sanitized is probably the word I would use.
Mhm.
You just try to do the best you can with it. And in the words of Bill Belichick, control what you can control and try to produce the best information and content for you, the consumer, that you can do given the hand that's been dealt to you.
With the possibility of news breaking any second, as we mentioned, could you describe your daily routine and how that compares when you travel on the road?
So right when you said that, William, you know what I did? I just went right down to my phone, right? And I'm like, all right, let me make sure I'm not missing anything, right?
Yeah, no, before we came on, I
daily,
was looking.
yeah, totally. And I'm glad we scheduled it for this time. Like, so people know a little behind the scenes. Let's give them a peek behind the curtain. If I had said 9 o'clock this morning, like we would have had to reschedule. This is Friday, September 10th, and it was the day that Cam Newton spoke at length in this YouTube
Yeah.
live thing, and I would have been taken away.
Yeah.
We would have had to reschedule. So tried to pick a pocket of time where I said, we got a chance that it won't happen to us. Honestly, William, the routine varies every day. I think I would say you just always got to be ready and try to balance your personal health. Like you got to get time in to eat healthy. You got to get time into exercise. You got to get time in to be with your family, knowing that you always got your phone on you and things could break at any time. So what I try to do is pick the early mornings when I talked about the Troy Brown book. Like it's less apt to happen at 3, 4, 5 in the morning. So sometimes I like to wake up really early because I have more clarity of thought at that time, or it's a time to exercise, or I can get this. So then I can take that time with the family. And if something happens, I can just quickly break off. Do you know what I mean? So it's just budgeting. Yeah.
Well, no, do you find yourself ever, I assume you're never reporting from Bristol and ESPN studios. You're predominantly in Foxborough at Gillette, and then occasionally we'll see an office shot.
That's right. That's exactly right. So they want you at the facility as much as possible. Because really, how do we know what's happening? You got to be there.
Mm-hmm.
Home office is a second place choice. If it has to be, maybe the weather doesn't cooperate. Maybe it just has to happen fast and you're not down at the facility at that moment. That's when you do the home office. But my choice would be 10 out of 10 at the facility if possible.
Do you ever find yourself, whether it's in Foxborough or on the road, collaborating with local or other journalists to report team developments, or do you find that the resources you have are sufficient?
I'm going to tell you a story from 2 hours ago where we were collaborating together. It's the Friday before the first game of the season, and the Patriots are having a practice inside their stadium. And we're told we're going to have a very short time to view this practice. It ended up being 4 minutes and 30 seconds.
Wow.
There's 53 players on the roster. There's 16 players on the practice squad. And for us as reporters, there's a couple things we want to make sure we can tell you, the consumer. Who's at practice? Are any injured players not there? How do those injured players look like they're moving?
Mm-hmm. Who's in the non-contact?
Correct. The red non-contact jersey. Maybe get a picture just to be able to show you, right? Like, hey, we're here. Here's what's happening. That's a lot in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So the group of reporters that were there might say, hey, we'll take the offense. You take the defense. We'll, call out the numbers. All right, I see number 2, 3, 4, 5. We did that on this day 2 hours, literally 3 before you and me are talking. And that's how we came to the conclusion that everyone was there except for number 19, Malcolm Perry, a player who they had claimed on waivers from the Dolphins. I think we all got pictures. And there's going to be times you're working by yourself, or for competitive reasons, you're not going to collaborate. But that's a time where I think if you're in a environment with other media members, that's, there's respect. There's respect for the profession. There's respect for the consumer. Hey, we're here for you. We're just trying to relay to you the information you're looking for. Then those things can happen. We have that here in New England. It's a cool thing.
Watching training camp and everything in between, is there a Patriots player you believe fans should keep an eye on? Someone flying under the radar with the ability to make plays and have an impact? I always look at, your 10 things on Sunday morning.
Yeah, thanks. That's one of my favorite pieces to do each week. It sort of goes back to working at the Boston Globe, where they, for decades, have had Sunday notebooks, that I grew up running to the end of the driveway to go grab the newspaper to read. Let's go with Josh Uche, second year outside linebacker. He was a second round pick last year out of Michigan. And as a pass rusher, he looked really good. And so to me, hardly played last year. They were trying to figure out this role for him. And he looks like he can be a really disruptive player for them.
Yeah, it's funny, as someone, watching the Patriots now, I've probably now a decade. Special teams has grown on me. And so, when you hear about undrafted Quinn Nordine coming, or even, the Swiss Army knife, the 7th round pick from Philadelphia, Jalen Mills, it's always those types of players, just kind of the underrated, someone who definitely can come up in the big moments.
I mean, I thought we saw it in the NFL opener, the Buccaneers and the Cowboys. I mean, that Buccaneers punter, Bradley Pinion, he pinned the Cowboys in pretty deep multiple times, So I think you talk about special teams. I always look at it and say, we never talk about it leading into the game,
but always after.
We talk about it after for good reasons or potentially bad, right? If you have a missed kick or
last
something
night
like that. So good thoughts.
Overall, how do you believe sports journalism has changed during this pandemic? Do you think the changes, though, are minimal given the abundance of technology and social media?
So there's a lot of different ways to answer this one, William. I would think that it's changed in sense a lot more is virtual now, right? So that's totally significant. I'll always pick in person over virtual, even though virtual can be more convenient. To me, there's no substitute for being in front of someone, shaking their hand, looking them in the eye, seeing their body language, so that's changed significantly. I always like to say that as much as things change from year to year, whether it's a pandemic or no pandemic, the fundamentals of the job and what we do shouldn't change, right? It's report the facts, check your sources twice, and try to stay true to all those fundamentals, and don't let the rush or urgency of social media affect, your reporting, in that you might make a mistake because your fundamentals are rushed due to that presence of social media and the immediacy of trying to relay information.
A few days after the Patriots signings of various big-name free agents, whether that be Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, or Matt Judon, you wrote an article on March 15th that, in my opinion, provided insight into how the Patriots approached free agency with respect to their salary cap this year. Could you elaborate on that?
For sure. So the Patriots did not have a lot of cap space in 2020. They had a lot of cap space in 2021, in a year that the overall cap in the NFL declined, which is unheard of, right? It never declines. It always grows. Yes, because of that, right? Revenues lost. So the Patriots felt like they were in a little bit of a strategic position to be a little more aggressive in free agency in 2021, because fewer teams had cap space to go sign players. And a couple players that maybe wouldn't have otherwise been available had the cap grown were now on the market. Hunter Henry as an example, Jonnu Smith as an example. It's entirely possible the Chargers franchise tag Hunter Henry again or re-sign him, or the Titans tag Jonnu Smith or re-sign him if they had more cap room. So that was sort of the crux of the article that also projects new TV deals that were on the horizon of being struck, I believe, at that time. Patriots also know the cap is going to grow into future years. So they felt like they could dive in 2021 with their cap space and less competition from other teams, and knowing that the cap is going to grow in 2022, 2023, 2024, and that they'll have some relief from their approach in 2021 in the years to come.
Were you surprised by these signings, or was the writing on the wall from last season, as Belichick alluded to, that dire changes were necessary and immediate?
So it's easy for me to answer now. I mean, I thought they would be aggressive. Like if we go back and do an accountability check, I think I had them in on a lot of like big name free agents before it started. But did I really think, William, they would be that aggressive? I can't tell you I did. You know, I joked around. I think I called them Billy Big Bucks for Bill Belichick, backing up the Brinks truck. So it did surprise me in terms of that level of aggressiveness. I expected aggressive, but not aggressive.
Mr. Reiss, thank you for joining the show today. Best of luck this upcoming season.
It's a great interview. Great questions, super prepared. Really appreciate it. I want to wish you the best this semester at Brandeis. And anyone that's listening at school, just to encourage them, keep doing what you're doing. You're at a great place, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other and hope for better, more optimistic times ahead for all of you.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you.